G'day, I'm Pete. You're watching Ahead of the Curve. Welcome back to the channel. So in my first video, I talked about how the solar feed-in tariff, also known as the buyback rate, which is essentially the amount of compensation that solar PV owners receive for any excess solar PV generated electricity which is fed back or sold back into the grid. Now, I talked about how the solar feed-in tariff has been slashed from 7.135 cents down to 3 cents for most hours of the day, and how it was increased to 10 cents between a short period of 6 hours between the hours of 3 and 9 p.m. Now, we talked about the reasons for this. We talked about what the intentions are, which is essentially to try and encourage people to purchase batteries. My opinion was that it was going to be ineffective in doing that, but those were just my first thoughts. I literally only did the video about half an hour after reading the ABC article, and I'll leave a link to that article and many other resources in the comment section below. But we've had a little bit more time to have a look into the detail of this new scheme. So first things first, I wanted to read to you an excerpt from one of the WA government web pages, and it says, your existing system, then you or your solar installer need to apply to your retailer, so either Synergy or Horizon Power here in WA, for the buyback rate via the retailer's website. If you are already in the process of finalising your application for buyback payments for your solar export, then you will have a week's grace to finalise and submit it to your retailer. Provided your retailer receives your eligible completed application on or before the 7th of September, you will receive REBS. So REBS is the Renewable Energy Buyback Scheme. It goes on to say if your application has already been made under REBS, then you'll receive REBS unless you choose to contact your retailer to switch to DEBS. DEBS is the Distributed Energy Buyback Scheme, which is the new time of use feed-in tariff, which has come in on the 31st of August. But as you can see there, you've basically got the weekend until Monday, till I presume either close of business or midnight on Monday, to still be able to do something about it if you already started thinking about a solar PV system. In order to sign up for REBS, you can do that in two ways. So you can either download and fill out a form. The problem with that form is that you've got to send it in by mail, so you probably won't have enough time to send that in to still qualify now. So if you're interested in the Renewable Energy Buyback Scheme, the old scheme, which I would 100% recommend, because that, as you'll see, it will go through the numbers, but the old scheme is a lot more advantageous than the new scheme. So there's another way to sign up to REBS, and that's to do it online through the Synergy website. Synergy is the incumbent retailer here in Western Australia. So for those watching this that aren't in WA, so this is the landing page that you'll see. So you need to click next. You'll need to go through, and I'll make another video as to how to fill out all the different pages and what you can expect as part of that application. Basically, as long as you've got a copy of a bill, your recent bill or any bill, as long as your details haven't changed, as long as you've got a bill, that bill will have all the information that you need, except one bit of information, and that is you'll need to nominate who your installer is going to be. If you still unsure about that, or if you're still finalising that, or if you want it to be pointed in the right direction, please do reach out to me. Please send me an email to teslaaotc@gmail.com. So AOTC just stands for Ahead of the Curve. So teslaaotc@gmail.com, and I'll do what I can to obviously point you or steer you in the right direction. Look, in the previous video, like I said, we discussed the reasons behind why the government decided to change what was a phenomenally successful scheme. We talked about the duck curve and trying to smooth that out, and I've included at least 3 suggestions as to a better way to go about doing that. But what I wanted to focus on now is the numbers. If you're wondering whether it's whether you should still buy a solar system under the new scheme, or whether you should still try and get in, if you've started looking at a solar system already, whether you should still try and get in under the old scheme, well, I'll try and compare and contrast the two. I've done some fairly detailed and comprehensive analysis on this, so hopefully it will be of some value. So let's start off firstly with how a solar PV system generates electricity during a typical sunny day. Now, in terms of how much so this is all based on a 6.5 kilowatt array on a 5 kilowatt inverter. That's the most common residential solar PV system bought in WA at the moment. 6.6 is the maximum that you can go to under the 133% rule in order to still be eligible for your STCs, but that's all a little bit of technical jargon which I can go into. Feel free to send me an email and I can elaborate if you like. But more importantly, let's have a look at how a solar PV system generates electricity. A 6.5 on 5 should generate, I've based my numbers on 29 kilowatt hours a day, or 29 units of electricity a day. You can work on 24 kilowatt hours as well. In fact, so this is based on a north-facing array. If you've got your panels, or if you have no other option but to go east or west, or somewhere in between, if your panels can't be on the optimal tilt, then or you might have some shading or what have you, then obviously, and degradation over the years as well. So incidentally, 24 kilowatt hours is what the Clean Energy Council suggests as being what one can expect from a 5 kilowatt solar PV system in Perth in Western Australia. So you can work on 24 kilowatt hours. So as you can see by this chart, so the columns, or the bars, they represent the solar PV generation. Along the horizontal axis down the bottom is the time of day. I've highlighted the bars in the middle in red. I've coloured them in red just to show you that most of and this obviously makes intuitive and natural sense, most of the solar systems generation will be at or around midday, so for obvious reasons. The amounts that the solar PV system will generate between the hours of about 9 and 3 p.m. is over 80%. So the vast bulk of any of your solar system benefits will only be able to be realised during those hours, unless you have a battery or some form of storage, of course. So the problem is that under the new scheme, the higher rate, the 10 cents, is only available from 3 p.m. So I've looked at, based on a average household with 4 people in the home, so 2 adults and 2 children, had a look and so what I did is I took into account that average household's consumption pattern throughout an average day. One of the downsides of the data is I didn't have separate data for weekdays and weekends, so that's one of the shortcomings of the data. But nevertheless, I still think it's the outcome or the result is fairly accurate. In fact, there was a study done by SMA. So SMA is one of the biggest and oldest solar PV inverter manufacturers in the world. Others, SolarEdge, Fronius and ABB, there's 15 or 20 or more others, but those 4 are really the high quality inverters, and I'd never recommend anyone buy any other inverter than one of those 4 manufacturers. But SMA did a study into, so they obviously, as a inverter manufacturer, they manage the monitoring systems as well, and they've got huge amounts of data, and they obviously went through their database and tried to have a look at what the average self-consumption rate was for residential households. This was done some time ago, but they came up with a level of between 20 and 40%. So my figures came in a little over 30%. So pretty much right there in the middle. So that's what I'm saying. So my result was fairly similar to what SMA came up with as well. So that blue line, that represents the average load profile of a 4-person household, so 2 adults, 2 children. That's, you know, on an average day. Like I said, no difference between weekends or weekdays. Now, that consumption profile is for households, so and it combines both production profiles of households with air conditioning and without air conditioning, and whether they use that air conditioning during the day or not. So that's all taken into account. What isn't taken account on purpose is households with solar PV systems. So this is what SMA in their study refers to as the natural self-consumption rate. So this is how much this is how a average family consumes their power without changing their habits in any way to try and increase the self-consumption rate, which is a natural thing to do, which is what most people with solar PV systems end up doing. So they see how great the solar PV system is, how much money it's saving them on their electricity bill, and it's just the first thing to get them down this journey of seeing what else they can do. And if that owner was educated properly when they bought their solar system, they'll know that there's a lot of things that you can do. For instance, your dishwasher, if you have one, you can still stack your dishes after dinner, and then you can have a timer and have that dishwasher come on at, let's say, 11 o'clock the next day. You can use your air conditioning obviously more effectively. You can also if you have a pool, you can obviously set your pool pump to come on while the sun's out, and there's lots of other things that you can do, but that's probably a topic for another video. So if we assume that a natural self-consumption rate exists where the family doesn't do anything to shift their habits, then the amount of solar PV that you could expect to feed back, so the amount of your generation that you could expect to feed back between the hours of 3 and 9 p.m. Actually, to be honest, it's really between the hours of 3 and 7 p.m. because after 6 p.m., as you can see, there's in the hour after 6 p.m. there's a tiny bit of generation, and there's nothing after 7 p.m. So the period from 7 to 9 p.m. really doesn't matter unless you have a battery. So it's really from 3 to 7 p.m. But during that period, there's only 13.5% of your overall system's generation that will be available to be exported during that time frame. So based on that, I did some figures. So as you can see in this table here, I'll look at the difference that the new scheme will make in terms of how much is available for power that's exported back to the grid. So if we use that 13.5% and that average house with 2 adults and 2 children as a base case, then you can see the amount available in terms of dollars and cents to be exported each year is effectively slashed in half. So this is what the new scheme does to new solar PV systems, which will come into effect from I think the release says from the 8th of November or some period early in November, because obviously, by the sounds of things, this has been made on the run, or maybe they wanted to keep this to themselves and didn't want the word to get out. So the retailers need to have some time to be able to put in systems in place to be able to charge you on a time of use feed-in tariff structure rather than an old time feed-in tariff structure. So, but yeah, as you can see, the exports have effectively halved if we go to a 3 and 10 cent feed-in tariff rather than the old 7.135 cents. Now this next table, I've looked at the total solar PV savings. So under the legacy scheme, or under the current scheme, under REBS, the Renewable Energy Buyback Scheme, the daily amount that an average family, the one that we've spoken about before in our example, could be expected to save is just shy of $4. So bi-monthly, by monthly I mean every 2 months, which is the average length of a electricity bill in Western Australia. So we get 6 bills in a year. So you could expect to save $242 $242 under the current scheme if you're an average household that only consumes 30% of, and look, once again, probably an unrealistic assumption, because once you get a solar PV system, especially if you're educated correctly, you'll be, you'll know how to manage your power so that you get a lot more out of your solar PV system and a much higher self-consumption rate rather than just or a much higher utilization rate rather than just the 30%. But even under the 30%, you could expect to save $242 per month, or about $1,452 a year, so about $1,400 a year. Under the new scheme, the $4 a day, it goes down to $3.25 a day in savings, or the $242 bill saving goes down to $198, and annually it goes from $1,452 down to $1,186. Now, in terms of how the economics are affected as a result of this change. And I wanted to focus on the economics because, as I mentioned in the first video, that's the primary factor that goes into the decision making as to whether or not to buy a solar PV system. There are some fantastic other benefits of solar PV systems. Obviously there's the environment and doing your part to reduce your footprint, but there's also, shading the roof, and that there's actually a proven effect of being able to reduce the temperature, particularly in summer, in a meaningful manner. Interestingly, in winter, the decrease in the temperature as a result of your roof being shaded is immaterial. So not much difference in winter, but it definitely benefits your house in summer. But like I said, let's just focus on the economics, because that's the prime reason when it comes to making a choice for not just for most households, but it's even more important commercially. So let's have a look. So I've looked into 3 assumed costs for a solar PV system. So once again, a 6.5 on 5, so 6.5 kilowatt PV array with a 5 kilowatt inverter. So I've looked at a $3,000, $5,000 and an $8,000 cost. So as you can see, with the $3,000 cost under the current scheme, that's a 48% simple return on investment, or a 2-year payback period. With the $5,000 system, it goes to 29%, or a 3.4-year payback period. And with an $8,000 system, the simple return on investment is 18%, or 5.5 years. With the new scheme, the 48% reduces to 40% for the $3,000 system, or 2.1 to 2.5 year payback period, and 29 to 24% for the $5,000 system, or a 3.4 year payback to 4.2 year payback. For an $8,000 system, it's 18% goes down to 15%, and a 5.5 year period gets stretched out to a 6.7 year payback period in terms of this particular scenario for the average household. Now, if the 48% sounds a bit too good to be true, or any of those figures sound a little bit too good to be true, especially in that first $3,000 assumed system cost column, then I'll have a little bit more to say about that. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. So stay tuned, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit further. So this next chart, if it looks a little bit too busy, that's a reason. There's a reason why it's so busy, is because this new feed-in tariff adds a lot more complexity to the whole consideration of buying a solar PV system, and that's a pity, because the simpler it is for someone to understand something, the obviously easier it is for them to get their head around and to perhaps make a purchase decision. The more complex it is, well, sometimes people just put these things in the too hard basket. So that's a real pity. So I've been in this industry for almost 10 years, and residentially, what I would explain to people if they were considering buying a solar PV system and they were looking at the economics, you could make a very simple case. You could say, well, on a worst case scenario, let's assume a 0% utilization rate, or a 0% self-consumption rate. So let's assume you're doing this for a holiday home which is unoccupied, or let's assume you go away for a 12-month holiday. I wish is what most people say, and you turn all your power, everything off at the power points. You don't use any power at all, and all the power produced by the solar PV system is sent back into the grid. So if we assume a 0% utilization rate, and let's work on the 24 kilowatt hours a day as a average for a 6.5 on 5 kilowatt system in Perth. Perth, WA, then 24 units of electricity, if they're sold at the existing 7.135 cents or the old system of 7.135 cents, that works out to a credit of about $1.71 per day. Multiply that by 365 days in the year, and I think it comes out to about $625. So, even if you're considering a $10,000 solar PV system, and by the way, you shouldn't pay that sort of money for a PV system now, about $9,000 is the most you should pay for a solar PV system, but you can get a really high quality system for about $8,000 now. So, but let's even assume the $10,000. $625 and $10,000, that's a 6.25% return on your money. As a worst case scenario, obviously a lot better than leaving your money rotting away in the bank at a fraction of a percent. Now, furthermore, unless you're on a Centrelink pension, and this is not tax advice, but the Australian Taxation Office actually has a product ruling to this effect, and especially if you're offsetting those credits against the debits on your electricity bill, then that 6.25% return should be tax free. In which case, to compare it to what you can get in a bank account at the bank, we really need to gross up that return by the marginal tax rate. Let's assume 30.5 or 32.5 as the fairly common marginal tax rate. Then if you gross that 6.25%, you get, if you gross that up, you get a little bit over 9%. So compare a little bit over 9% as to a fraction of a percent for leaving your money in a savings account in the bank. If you leave your money in a offset account, obviously that's not taxable either. Then you're still comparing 4 or 5% against 6.25%. But don't forget this: the 6.25% is your worst case scenario. If you look at the other end of the spectrum, and if we assume that you consume all the power that the system produces, then you're looking at savings of over $3,000 a year, and it's a 33% return on your money, and less than a 3-year payback period, and so on. But let's get back to this table. So this whole table is once again based actually not the whole table, just that bit that's highlighted with the black border. That's the closest, being a 30% self-consumption rate, that's closest to the average family home if they do nothing to shift their energy consumption habits. But that's probably not, as I said, it's probably not realistic, and most people will do something to because it doesn't take much effort to reset your pool pump, and then for the next 25 years or however long you keep that pool, you're going to, it's going to pay dividends for you when you do it. So, a small change that has lasting benefits. So, but let's look at other scenarios. So I've looked at different utilisation rates. Now that first one, that 100% utilisation rate, I've just included that there just so you can see, what the other extreme is to 0%. Mind you, all these figures are based on 29 kilowatt hours a day. So that's something that you can expect on a north-facing roof in Perth from a good quality solar PV system. So let's ignore that 100% to begin with, and let's go to the next table. And obviously we've got the different utilisation rates, but let's focus on 50%. So let's assume that half of all the solar PV that's generated by your system, let's say it generates 29 kilowatt hours a day. To put that into perspective, the average household with 2 adults and 2 children uses 20 kilowatt hours a day. So the system's producing 29, you're using 20. We're going to assume that half of your system this generation you get to use in the home, because no doubt you'll be using some power at night as well. So at that 50% utilisation rate under the current system, that finishes obviously it comes into effect in November, early November, but you have till Monday to put in your REBS application if you started down that path already. So the legacy scheme, so this is the old system, $19.19. So $1,919 is how much you can expect in annual savings on a $3,000 system, which is a 64% return on your money. Now, if we under the new system, it's a lot more complicated, so we've got to make some assumptions. So I've made 3 assumptions. So the first one is the 13.5% rate. So as I said earlier in the video, so this is what a average household that uses 20 kilowatt hours a day, 2 adults, 2 children, if they don't change their habits, that's how much of their solar PV system's capacity would be available to be exported between the hours of 3 and 9 p.m. So under the 13.5%, with half your solar generated electricity being exported, and only 13.5% between 3 and 9, the returns would be about $1,750 in savings every year, or about a 58% return on your money. If we assume that for some reason you've got a battery or an existing battery already or what have you, and you're able to export all the 50% of the system's generating capacity into the grid between the hours of 3 and 9 p.m, well, then your savings are $2,000 or 69% as a simple return on investment. And if we look at the other extreme, and this other extreme is actually probably the most realistic scenario, most families will probably find that under the new system that they can't export anything between the hours of 3 and 9 p.m. So, but even under that scenario, that's $1,700 a year in savings, or about a 56% return on your investment. Now, if that 56% still sounds a bit too good to be true, well, as the saying goes, that's probably because it is. And that's because what makes all this possible is that number that's highlighted in red there, and that's the $3,000 assumed cost of that system. So look, solar PV systems in Perth, you can buy them as cheap as $2,500, but as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. Now, what I would say is, some people will say, well, okay, I can buy a really high quality system for $9,000, or a low quality system for $3,000. Well, that still leaves me $6,000. Even if that first system doesn't work, I can get rid of it in 3 years' time, and I can still afford to buy 2 other systems for the money of the higher quality system. Now, I will argue that that's flawed logic for a number of reasons. Well, firstly, let's say after 3 years that system fails to work properly and you need to get rid of it. Well, your payback period, even under that $3,000 system, will be close to 3 years, 2 to 3 years. So just as the system has started to pay for itself, and just as it started to put money into your pocket, you've got to now spend more money. You've got to throw it out and buy another system. So, and if that happens again in 3 years' time, you've got to do that again. So you seem to, under that logic, you'll always be chasing your tail, and it defeats the whole purpose of putting the system in. If economics are your primary driver, well, if saving money on your electricity bill is the primary reason for doing this, well, you never get to actually save any money on a net basis, because any money that's saved, you'll have to spend on buying a new system. So it doesn't make any sense. From a practical perspective also, what people often forget is, well, you've got to think about, well, if that system fails, what happens then? You've already got a system up on your roof, so you'll need to call an installer to take that system or uninstall it. Now, being an electrical system, obviously, unless you're an electrician yourself, you're not allowed to obviously go there and uninstall it yourself. So the cost to get an installer out to remove an existing system can be several $100s, $200, $300, $400, $500, $600 easy. So let's work on $600, which is not unreasonable. So there's $600 to uninstall the system. What do you then do with the panels, for instance? They've got silicon in them. You can't just throw them in your council bin. So what do you and I mean, they wouldn't even fit. So, panels 2 meters by 1 meter, or 1.7 meters tall by 1 meter wide for the residential panels, generally speaking. So, and they weigh a good 20 kilos per panel. So, what do you do with 20 of these things? Well, if you dispose of them the way you should appropriately, unfortunately, there's only one solar panel recycling facility in the whole of Australia, as far as I know anyway, and that's in Adelaide. And they charge $30 per panel to recycle, old solar panels. So let's say you have 20 panels, you probably have more, but let's say you have 20 panels, 20 times $30. Well, there's another $600 just to dispose of the panels. But the recycling facility is in Adelaide, so you'll probably have to spend $1,000 to shift those panels or to transport them all the way to Adelaide. So, that's $2,200 just to get rid of a $3,000 system. So, probably false economics there. So that's why I've included numbers on a $5,000 system, which is probably a lot more realistic and probably what the average person spends on a solar PV system these days. Once again, I wouldn't I'd never, for $5,000 you're not going to get a great system. You're not going to get a high quality system that you can have the peace of mind knowing that that system's going to be there for the next 25 years. And look, most systems come with a 25-year warranty, not on all the components, depending, so inverters, for instance. So SMA has a 5-year warranty, and that can be extended right out to 25 years. Solar Edge comes with a 12-year product warranty for the inverter and 25 years for the optimizers. Fronius has a 5+5-year warranty. It's been 5+5 for I don't know how many years now, so we just referred to that as a 10-year warranty. ABB I think is 5 years from memory. Actually, it might be 10 years. I can't even remember. But important to know that even with Solar Edge, like I said, that 12-year warranty, they can actually be extended right out to 25 years, and the 5-year warranty with SMA can be extended right out to 25 years. Now, every panel sold in Australia legally has to have a 25-year performance warranty. What's more relevant is actually the product warranty, and the product warranty on average is roughly about 12 years, but you can get panels with 15-year warranties, product warranties, and even 25-year product warranties. So you can have a 25-year warranty for a system. If you've got a 4 or 5 year payback period, then you've got 20 years during which time the system's just putting cash in your pocket. So and I would also, if you're thinking, well, look, I'll just get a $3,000 system because I'm not going to be in this house for longer than about 3 or 4 years, I would also argue that that's a bit of a false economy as well. Reason being is home buyers are starting to get a little bit more savvy. So it's not like 5-10 years ago when no one knew the difference between SMA, Fronius, Solar Edge, or what have you. These days, people are a little bit more savvy. They even know some of the panel brands a little bit more. And, it only takes, even if they don't, it only takes 2 seconds now for someone, during a home open, they see the inverter in your garage or wherever it happens to be. They Google the brand name and see straight away that, you've just put in the cheapest components you possibly could. It's a bit like putting, you wouldn't put the cheapest appliances you possibly can in your kitchen, especially if you're interested in the resale value of your house, because, it tells you something about, or makes the potential home buyer suspicious as to where else you've potentially tried to save. Was it in the building of the house? Was it in the maintenance? So probably doesn't do wonders for your resale value if you're putting in a really cheap system either, especially with home buyers becoming a little bit more savvy about different brands of solar equipment these days. But let's quickly have a look at that $5,000 example. So with the 50%, you can see under the current system, it's still $1,900 a year in savings, or 38%. Under the new system, a $5,000 system, you're looking at $1,749 in savings, or about a 35%. 35% simple return on investment, but that's assuming 13.5% is fed back into the grid between the hours of 3 and 9 p.m. So 13.5% of the 50% of the available solar PV generating capacity. But let's focus on the $8,000 system. I would advocate that you need to spend at least $8,000 for a high quality system, and that's probably as cheap as you'll get a high quality system these days. You can pay $10,000 and $12,000. I would say if you're just like you shouldn't be buying a $2,500 or a $3,000 system, I don't think you should be paying any more than $9,000 for a solar PV system these days. So if you're paying any more than that, you're probably getting ripped off on the other side. So, but $8,000 you can get a really high quality PV system these days in Perth, WA at least, and that's the out of pocket cost. also after STCs. So if we have a look at an $8,000 system based on a 50% utilisation or a self-consumption rate, so under the current system your savings would be $1,919 as always, and that works out to a 24% return on your investment. So you know, a little bit over a 4-year payback period if you are fortunate enough to be able to get your REBS application in before Monday. If you miss Monday or you can't get your application in before then because you haven't started looking at solar PV already, and you're thinking about, well, you know, have I missed the boat? Should I still buy a solar PV system? My answer to that would be a resounding absolutely, definitely still go for a solar PV system. Because have a look, even if you assume that you only get to use half of the system's generating capacity, it's still a 21.86% return on your money. So roughly, you know, a little bit shy of a 5-year payback period, and that's assuming that only 13.5% of what the system can export you can feed back into the grid between the hours of 3 and 9 p.m. If we assume that all your 50% of your PV generation capacity can be fed back into the grid between 3 and 9 p.m., you're looking at a 25 or 25.9 or 26% simple return on investment. If we assume, and this is once again a more realistic scenario, that you can't export anything between the hours of 3 and 9, then you're looking at $1,700 or a 21% return. So once again, still shy of a 5-year payback period with a 25-year warranted product. A very different scenario. In the first video, I was talking about a 18-year payback period based on just the feed-in tariff portion between 3 and 9 p.m. But even if you include all the other benefits of a battery, you'll be still struggling to get below a 10-year payback period. So, you know, just as you start getting your money back, the warranty is no longer valid. You know, that makes it a marginal proposition at best. Whereas solar PV right now, you know, 3 to 5 year payback period, you know, or 3 to 7 years if you like, with a 25-year warranted product. That's a much different proposition and a bit of a no-brainer. And if you're sitting on the fence as to whether you should go ahead and buy a system under this new distributed energy buyback scheme, then, you know, like I said, I would definitely recommend yes. I'll give you an example. So I remember, so we bought and we installed our 6.5 on 5 kilowatt system back, you know, almost 10 years ago now. And at the time when the 40 cents was about to run out, I was telling anyone and everyone I could and telling them to, you know, go and buy a solar PV system. I spent $30,000 on our system back then. You know, a similar system you can buy now for about $8,500. So yeah, so when that feed-in tariff was going down from 40 to 20 cents, I was trying to tell everyone to get in before it goes down. But a lot of people made the mistake. They missed that 40 cent feed-in tariff qualification, and 20 cents was all that was available. And they made a very big mistake, which they've regretted ever since. And I haven't spoken to any person who hasn't regretted not going ahead with the 20 cents. So, you know, only, let's say a week earlier, it was 40 cents. You missed out on the 40 cents. Now it's only 20 cents. So you decided that you've missed the boat. Probably the biggest mistake you could have made, because even if you had to still spend $30,000 for your solar system back in those days, by the way, the $30,000, that includes the renewable energy certificate, so that's the gross cost of the system. So at the time, they were called renewable energy certificates in those days. Now they're called small technology certificates, or STCs. They were trading, I can't even remember whether it was $8, $10, $12, $15, whatever the amount was, but it was fairly low. So I decided to generate those certificates myself and keep them rather than surrendering them to the installer, because those certificates have government imposed ceiling, a maximum trading price of $40. The way I figured, let's say they were worth $10, I figured, well, I've got $10 to lose and $30 to gain. Now they're trading at about $36, so it doesn't make sense to try and keep them. It makes sense to surrender them to your installer. But I generated those certificates and created them myself, and I kept them, and I sold them a few years ago at about $36. So, but even back then, what I'm trying to say is, if you missed the 40 cents, and because of that you decided not to go ahead with the 20 cents, you would have regretted. And just like now, if you regret missing out on the 7.135 cents, still go ahead with the 3 and 10 cent feed-in tariff, because it's still worth it. And you know, if you don't end up going ahead, you will regret it, because these are, you know, you can't ever go back in time. So once all these savings are foregone, they're gone forever, and you can't ever go back in time and try and claw them back. So look, that's about it as far as the economics are concerned. If you're interested to know, you know, the motivations or the reasons behind why the state government is now shifting to this time of use, a much more complex system, a time of use tariff, considering that the previous feed-in tariff was a phenomenal success and worked really well. I'll leave a link to my previous video in the description section below, and I've gone into some detail there, and I talked about the duck curve. I talked about at least 3 better ways that they could have gone about trying to do this. So, you know, number 3, you could do what they did in South Australia, and you could incentivize solar PV owners or anyone looking to buy a battery. You could have incentivized them directly. So you could have given them $1,000 to $3,000 of the cost of a battery as an upfront amount. And like I said, they did that in South Australia, and that's worked really well over there. So that's what I would advocate as the 3rd best option. The first or the 2nd best option would be either a combination of one of these, but definitely it would involve EVs, because I think and as I've demonstrated in the first video, the load profile of an EV just fits absolutely perfectly with that of the problem of the duck curve, which we have in the grid. So I think, you know, electric vehicles would be ideal, and probably in combination with grid scale battery storage, because it's not, you know, I argue it's not the role of the consumer to be firming up the grid. It's the role of the network operator and the generators. It's the role of the system, not the consumer. But yeah, if you want more information on that, like I said, have a look at the other video. If you're got any sort of value out of this, and if you learned something, please give the video a thumbs up. If you know someone else that might benefit from this, please forward them a link to the video. If you disagree with me on anything I've said, if you think I've left something important out that I should have mentioned, you know, or anything you wanted to add, please do so in the description section below. Please feel free to send me an email, especially if you want to be pointed in the right direction of where to go with your solar PV purchase now. Thank you to everyone who sent me emails for the first video. Apologies, I haven't got back to replying to all of them, but I intend to do so over the next few days. So if I haven't replied yet, just be patient, give it a few more days, and I will reply. It's not like there's been that many emails, I've just been quite busy. So, the other thing I'll also mention is, if you're in the market for buying a Tesla, as you know, this channel is all about Tesla and electric vehicles in general, but I also make videos about sustainable energy and other topics. But if you're in the market for a Tesla, or if you know anyone else that is, make sure you or they use a referral code. That scheme has changed a little bit recently, at least the implementation of that scheme. So previously what we were able to do is, if you forgot to use a referral code when you bought your Tesla, you would miss out on the 1,500 kilometers or 1,000 miles of free supercharging, because the referral code is applicable internationally anywhere around the world. Now, what we were able to do previously is maybe try and send an email to Tesla to try and plead that they retrospectively apply the supercharging credits, but that can no longer be done. So at the time that you pay your deposit for your car, which is only $150 now in Australia Australia or $100 in the US, then make sure you use a referral code. I'd love you to use my code, which is Peter1339, and I'll include a link to that referral code in the description section below. And on another topic, while I still remember it, one of the whole ideas of this scheme was to try and get people to put more panels on a west-facing roof. So if I get a chance sometime, I'll make a video around that as well. I'll also make a video around how to fill out the Synergy REBS online application form. Hopefully I'll get a chance to do that in the next few days, and I'll post that up as well. But if you get stuck with that, or if you have any problems, once again, send me an email to teslaaotc@gmail.com. AOTC just stands for ahead of the curve. So teslaaotc@gmail.com. Feel free to send me an email if you're looking at buying a solar PV system, if you want some more information, or if you have any other views that you wanted to share, or any other information. If someone has any data along the average household and how the load curve differentiates between weekdays and weekends, I would really appreciate that, because that's the one weakness of my analysis. But nevertheless, the analysis was still ended up being accurate enough. But yeah, just for completeness, it'd be nice to have access to that data as well. So if there's any of you out there that have access to that data or know where to get it from, please send me through an email, because I'd appreciate it. That really is it for me for now. So please make sure you subscribe and press the notification bell next to the subscribe button, so you can get alerted to new videos as and when they come out. But as always, stay safe, stay sustainable, and stay ahead of the curve. Ciao.